Harbour Crescent is a part of Harwich I hadn't fished before. It's an area of shallow, mixed broken ground at the mouth of the Stour and Orwell Estuary, directly opposite the container port of Felixstowe. This is a record of 3 sessions in April and May, fishing from the railings. For the first session, I've chosen a spot closest to the stone pier. Since I'm not familiar with the venue, I've started with a short snood, 3-hook, clip-down rig, fishing ragworm. I'll have a few casts with this to see if I get any bites before setting up my second rod. I've started just before the top of the tide, but I haven't had any bites yet. However, my bait's been mangled, so there appears to be a bit of crab activity. That means I might set up my second rod to fish larger baits, which might last a bit longer. Although I've got plenty of ragworm with me, I could be getting through that at a fairly alarming rate if I'm not getting any bites. I don't mind if I'm catching, but I don't just want to come here and feed the crabs. A fair amount of people walking along this path, so as you can see I've placed my tripod over the railings and I'm sitting at an angle to try and not block the path too much. With dog walkers, cyclists and mobility scooters going past, you need to be a bit aware of your surroundings. Having said that, it is safe to fish here, and there's also the convenience of being able to park behind where you fish. Before recasting, I'll set up a second rod. I decided to use a loop rig on that, with a bigger bait at the bottom snood, and a larger ragworm on a size 1/0 hook at the top. Hopefully there might be some bigger fish about. If there are, then the steps to my left will come in handy, since I'll be able to walk down them in order to land them. Quick look at the 2 rigs that I'm using. Using long rods, I need a fair amount of space to cast. Since my lead will hang behind a wall when casting, I've got to be aware of people pulling up quickly to park behind me. It also makes sense not to directly park your own vehicle behind you unless you want a dented roof. Having got both rigs out, a quick run through locational details. I've covered the regional setting in my previous Harwich videos, so here I'll just run through the location within the town itself. Dovercourt Prom and Beach are certainly worth fishing. Then you've also got the 2 piers. Homing in on Harbour Crescent, I've identified the nearby venues. The stone pier has a keep off notice, but people still fish from it. The lower light separates Harwich Beach from the Harbour Crescent stretch. This area is part of Harwich Foreshore, which is a site of special scientific interest. Although you can't see it, you're close to Redoubt Fort, and I approach it from Barrack Lane. Zooming in, I've identified the 3 marks that I've fished for this video. The first bite comes to the 3-hook rig. I had a couple of little taps, but it looks like I missed it. That's promising. I get an indication on a rod with a loop rig. Get another little knock which is worth striking into. Since you're fishing over mixed ground, there are a few snags here, but most of the time you should be able to pull through. Fortunately, I managed to pull out of this snag. And it feels like there's a fish on. It's only a dogfish, but I'll settle for that since it's got me off the mark. The fish has taken a ragworm on top hook rather than a squid and bluey cocktail on the bottom, but the stronger scent of that might have attracted it in the first place. Switch to the boom rig, see if I can get any bites on that. Got a few little taps on the rod with a boom rig. Winding in, it feels like there's something on. It's only pouting, but I was wondering whether those bites were from crabs. Tide is starting to ebb, and the little taps continue. Little knots get a bit frustrating, but then I get one on the loop rig. This one's a bit sharper, and I think I've hit it. It feels a bit better than a pouting. Crab has attached itself to the squid and bluey, but there's a flatfish on the top hook. Quite pleased with that, a fairly decent flounder. The little knots continue on the boom rig. Although I'm hitting the bites now, they're all just little pouting. Although quite frustrating, I enjoyed that session. I ended up with 4 pouting, but it would have been a lot more if I could hit the bites. The squid and bluey didn't produce anything, but I am pleased with that dogfish, and I'm always happy to catch flounders. For my second session, I chose to fish at the far end of Harbour Crescent. The path's a bit wider here, and you can see the lower lighthouse with the beach huts in front.
Any catch?
I went to start it.
Enjoy.
I think it's coming back, is it?
Once again, I've started with a 3-hook click down rig as I set up my second rod. Getting another 3-hook rig ready for this, but I'm also setting up that loop rig that I had last time. My hooks come back completely bare on this rig, so the crab activity is much higher this time. Another very slow start with no bites. Time to try the loop rig. This time I'm only using plain continental leads, so it's easy to drag the rigs. This has two benefits. If there's a lot of crab activity, at least you're moving your baits away from the crabs at some time, and of course moving the bait might induce a fish to have a go. Dragging the bait seemed to work this time. I get a little knock and I think I've hit it. Although there's a crab and weed present, there is also a little pouting. Crabs are really rampant today. Every time I bring my rig back, all the bait's gone. A second pouting comes in. No bites on loop rig so far. Since the ragworm doesn't last very long, I've now got bluey and squid cocktails on both hooks. disappointing session this time, with hardly any bites. All I ended up with was 3 pouting. Before leaving Harwich, I looked round some other marks, then came back to see this venue at low tide. I wanted to check out the ground I'd been fishing over, then choose a spot for the 3rd session. These 2 clips show the ground at the 2 marks I previously fished at. You can see there's a lot of food holding areas for the fish, but you can also see it's a perfect habitat for the crabs. I came back at the beginning of May to fish an area between the 2 that I previously fished. When I looked over the ground at low water, there appeared to be some more muddy patches here. Rig choice was the same as before, but this time I've got some crab with me. So that's on the bottom hook of the loop rig and tipping the ragworm on the top. I started this session earlier than the previous ones and the tide's still coming in, but it's still a very slow start. As before, there's very little in the way of tidal pull. I'm a lot more conscious of a crab situation this time and I'm putting my rigs around a bit more. Although I'm not getting any bites, it didn't take very long for my first crab to come in. There's a lot more crab activity now, and the crabs are even taking my peeler crab. So, in order to make that last a bit longer, I decided to wrap that in squid. Still using the large ragworm on the upper snood. It's taken a long time, but eventually I'll get a bite. After a couple of sharp taps, I hook into something. Whatever this is, it doesn't feel like a pouting. Okay, so it's not very big, but at least it's a fish. A little basslet. Bit more weed this time, and obligatory crab. I'll get another small schoolie bass, but to cut a long story short, I'll finish on my last fish of the day. I was hoping that my sessions would improve as the summer months are arriving. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case, and I've probably fished this venue a bit too early. The summer species have started to arrive, but they're not here in any numbers yet. One of the locals passing said it can be pretty good here for bass, and looking at the nature of the ground, that doesn't surprise me. Unfortunately, my last fish of the day was not a bass, but an eel. Although I don't mind catching them, as long as they don't ruin my rigs, I wouldn't actually want to set out to fish for them. Although the venue is very shallow, it is coloured water, so I would imagine that some big fish would come in close. It looks like there's potential for catching decent bass later in the year, if you catch it right, and I'd imagine you'd want to be fishing it when high tide is just before dusk.